Well, folks, here we are to recap episode 4 of Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power. I'm here with my good friend Andriel, forged from the shards of Narsil, which actually makes an appearance in this week's episode of Lord of the Rings. And yes, I do own this. This is like personally owned by me. This episode is sponsored by Good Ranchers. So guys, actually, I kind of, I liked this episode, I'll be honest with you. It was good. The reason that it was good is because there were no Harfeet. This is like my number one thing that I hate. No more Harfeet. Just cut that entire storyline out and just give us Gandalf and we can be done here. This episode moved the plot forward a lot. So this should have been episode 3. They should have condensed the first 2 episodes into basically one episode or even a prologue. And maybe we start with last week's episode. But this episode begins and we are on the island of Numenor with Galadriel and not Sauron, who's Halbrand. We realize that Galadriel is really bad at politics, but Halbrand is actually pretty good at politics. And we realize also that Halbrand is pretty clearly Sauron. And the reason I say that is because he literally spells out how he is going to ensnare everyone with the rings, right? He actually has an entire speech where he says to Galadriel, you know, you're real bad at politics. If you want to be good at politics, what you should do is you should find out what people fear. And she's like, and then you should use it against them. He's like, no. Then you should give them a solution and you should control the solution to the fear, right? Which is literally what he's about to do with the rings. He's going to give people rings to control their fear, and then he's going to have a master ring forged in secret, right, that controls all of the other rings. I think that Halbrand has kind of given away the game here because he spelled out his entire strategy. Nonetheless, we now know kind of what direction that is going. This episode really, when it comes to Numenor, is about Galadriel basically recruiting the Queen of Numenor, the Queen Regent of Numenor, to her side to go to the west and fight the rising threat that's emerging in the Southlands. Now, I was unaware, actually, that the news from the Southlands had penetrated Numenor at this point. So I guess that happened sometime during the break. It's not clear how information travels here because when Galadriel got there, nobody seemed to think that there was any rising force from the sort of dark side here of Morgoth. But apparently, they've all now figured this out. And because they've all figured this out, it turns out that they are increasingly willing to go to war on behalf of Galadriel. So that whole storyline is fine. And we get a shot of this guy, right? Yeah, in the background, if you're looking for it, you can see the original Narsil in the background, which is eventually going to be used, of course, by Isildur to cut off the ring from Sauron's hand, who may be Halbrand. So this is where things start to get fun because all of the intellectual property from the original Lord of the Rings trilogy is starting to make an appearance, right? The things you actually care about. Isildur, Sauron, Narsil, the Palantir makes an appearance, right? Like all, which by the way, that effect was very cool. I have to say that the effect that they used with the Palantir, where suddenly it kind of shards out and you see the future, that was very neat. Okay, meanwhile, you have the secondary story. So we have our hero elf guy, Arondir, and Arondir is finally meeting Adar, okay? And we find out that Adar is not, in fact, an orc. He is, in fact, an elf. And so we get a conversation where Arondir has the capacity, it looks like, to maybe kill Adar, but he's kind of curious about Adar, so he doesn't end up killing him, which of course will end up being a fatal flaw. I mean, they make a big deal out of the fact that he has the ability right now to put an end to this and sacrifice his life, but he doesn't do so. That is definitely going to come back to bite him. So he has a conversation with Adar that's kind of interesting. When it comes to this conversation with Adar, Adar is a really interesting character. He's apparently supposed to be Luciferian. I mean, he is satanic in the way that he is telling lies that seem to have the tincture of truth. Zach makes clear to me, because this is outside my frame of reference, producer Zach, he makes clear that the reference to some lies digging so deep that they're in the roots and the rocks, that this is a reference to the book of Luke. I would have missed that because, again, outside my frame of reference, but cool. I mean, that's better writing. And I'm curious and interested to know more about what Adar's story is and why he has turned himself over to the forces of Morgoth. And then he is released into the wild in order to deliver a message. And it's weird that Adar has decided that he's going to be the guy to deliver the message, but maybe he sees something in Arondir that can be turned to the dark side of the Force. And I think that's probably what's going on. And then we have the third storyline. We're back with single mom Bronwyn and her obnoxious son Theo. They have all gone to this tower. Alas, they have no food. So they have to continuously make sort of forays out into the countryside to get food. And Theo is like, I'm going to go back to the village where all of the orcs were and I'm going to grab all the food. And Bronwyn's like, you're an idiot. Why are you doing that? He's like, I don't listen to you, Mom, because I'm an idiot. So I'm going to do what I want. So he goes over to the village with one of his idiot teenage friends. And naturally, like idiot teenagers, they get themselves into all sorts of trouble. Now, there is a bit of a question that I have. Again, this goes back to a bit of inconsistency with regard to, can the orcs be in sunlight or not? Because they're kind of in sunlight. There's a part where he runs out into the village and the sun has kind of disappeared behind a cloud, but it's not like completely black outside. But the orcs can, I guess, now run around outside. In any case, he goes, he nearly gets himself captured, and he pulls out the hilt of what appears to be Sauron's sword, and he sort of gets himself out of a bad scrape. He's about to be killed when Arondir, who's been released, as we say, by Adar, he appears from nowhere and proceeds to save the obnoxious teenager Theo. We'll get to more on this in just 1 second. First, Americans are worried. Food and gas prices are higher than I've ever seen in my lifetime, which is why I'm grateful for the best meat delivery service in America, Good Ranchers. Good Ranchers is awesome. I know because they actually sent me a kosher steak. And let me tell you, it is one of the best steaks I've ever had in my entire life. While grocery store meat prices continue to rise, Good Ranchers' inflation-proof model locks in your price the day you subscribe for the life of your subscription. Plus, you can pause your subscription for up to 90 days or cancel anytime you want, but you won't want to. Good Rancher ships 100% American meat, born, raised, and harvested in the United States directly to your door. All of their beef is prime or upper choice, the two highest grades. Superior steakhouse quality is their stock in trade. Again, Good Ranchers not only supports American agriculture, they are also big fans of The Daily Wire. They share our values. They sponsor all our shows, so go check them out. You'll be helping them, you'll be helping us. Go to goodranchers.com/Ben. Use code Ben at checkout. You'll get $30 off plus free shipping. You can subscribe to lock in your price and recession-proof your meals for life. That's goodranchers.com/Ben. Use code Ben at checkout. Okay, meanwhile, Arondir takes the rest of them back to the watchtower where he promptly informs Bronwyn, who I guess has assumed the leadership based on the fact that she killed one orc, like one. And he tells her that you either have to surrender and declare your allegiance to Morgoth or you are going to all be killed. I'm not sure that you need the message. If there was a force that were coming through and burning all of the villages in a particular area, it seems like surrender or death are usually the two options, unless there's a third that has been unspecified. Anyway, he delivers the message. The truth is he's probably not there to deliver the message. You have to assume that that's the case, right? That Arondir is actually there as sort of a quasi-poisonous, he doesn't know it yet, spy on behalf of Adar, because as we all know, the Southlands is going to turn into Mordor. Something bad is going to happen there, and I would assume that Arondir is a part of it, which is probably why he was released by Adar in the first place. Just forecasting what's going to happen there. Meanwhile, annoying Theo gets even more annoying because he meets with a weird old guy, and he and weird old guy have something in common. They have the solidarity tattoo from Sauron. And so they are both going to be messengers for Sauron or agents of Sauron during the battle to come. Okay, so all of that stuff is good. We've got Elrond, and Elrond is hanging out with Durin, and we get this kind of very long and odd sequence where Elrond is talking to Disa, and Disa's trying to hide the fact that Durin is actually looking for Mithril. I'm not sure why that's so hidden or so crazy, but eventually it turns out that he tells Elrond what's going on. Elrond tells Durin that he should talk to his dad because his dad might die at some point, which was completely unnecessary. Like, his dad is like, well, you should shut down the mining. And Durin's like, I don't want to shut down the mining. I hate my dad. And then Elrond says to him, well, you should like your dad because your dad might die one day. He's like, oh, that's true. I never thought of that. And then he goes and he talks with his dad, and his dad's like, yeah, we should probably shut down the mining. He's like, you know what? You're right. We should shut down the mining. We're best friends now. A couple of other notes. So when it comes to the mining and why exactly the mountain keeps collapsing in, pretty clear, according to producer Zach, who is an expert on this stuff, that this is also a reference to the Balrog, which is, in fact, referenced in the original Fellowship of the Rings, because there's a whole discussion about how they dug too deep. They dug too greedily and too deep. Right, that's the line from the original Fellowship, and they uncovered the Balrog. So maybe that's the direction that this is going. That makes some sense. The climax of this particular episode is the decision by Numenor to essentially join the war with Galadriel against Sauron, who, again, has not appeared yet. We don't know if Halbrand is going to go with her or if he's going to stay back in Numenor. We don't know that at this point. And we now know that Isildur is going to go with the Queen Regent and Galadriel back to the west. He's going to be joined by his two ne'er-do-well friends who got kicked out of the Navy because Isildur, I guess, just is kind of a doofus. And so they are all going to go back to the west. So that is where the episode leaves off. So the big critique here is that, why is this episode 4? It seems like pretty much all the content to this point could have been done in like 2 episodes. It shouldn't have taken this long. This episode moved a lot faster than the last 3 did, and so it seems like the series is picking up steam, which I'm excited about, because if the series is actually going to have legs, then they're going to have to pick up steam. And we got to get back to the West. We got to get back to what Sauron is doing, what Adar is doing, who is Sauron, right? All this stuff. But it looks like they're moving toward that. I will say I'm glad that I've stuck with it long enough to actually get to the plot points in the show. I just wish they had done that faster. So it's improving episode by episode, which is a good thing, actually. It's a good sign.